Hello, everyone. Come on in. Come on in. Give it another 30 seconds here to let folks, hopefully you've had your morning coffee, you've eaten your lunch, all that good stuff. But all right, so we're going to get going here. Welcome. My name is Stephen Gould. I am the Senior Program Specialist with the CBO. And today we got something really special for you. We're going to talk about non-deployment stuff, and we have a new team member, super team member, super team member, and I am not going to steal the thunder. But anyway, this is a special presentation around non-deployment. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Melanie Coletti to you. So, Melanie, go ahead and take it away, and do what you do.
Thank you, Stephen. And I also
You're
want to
welcome.
say hello, Megan. Megan Gerner is here as well, doing the Zoom. Yeah. And I guess this is three of the super team, right, Stephen?
Yeah.
Stephen, we're a super team at CBO. Yeah, I am Melanie Coletti. I'm also program manager, specifically focused though on digital access and inclusion, which is why I wanted to share some maybe pointers or to provide you with some tools that might be useful as you think about applying for non-deployment funding at the broadband office. So we can go to the next slide, Megan. This is what we're talking about today. We want to make sure that you have good grant proposals. So we want to cover briefly the requirements, the criteria, think about what it is that we're sort of looking for, and then how to design programs that are focused on impact. We want to think about outcomes that are the right size for the projects that you're thinking of. And we also want to talk about metrics today because I think metrics are often an afterthought in this space, and we want to make sure that they are not as you all apply for funds. And then at the very end, we'll talk about aligning all of the elements of the proposal based on what we've talked about today. And just an FYI, I mean, this is not like a must do, but I really do want to get in people's minds maybe a different way of thinking about measurements and things. So next slide. Norms and requests today. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. If Stephen or Megan or I can answer them in the chat, great. If not, I'll try to pause occasionally so people can ask questions. If we don't get to your questions or if we don't have answers, remember this is a brand new funding opportunity that the office is offering. You're welcome to send an email to advanced_cbo@state.co.us with any questions that you have, and we will figure it out. We love to have video on if you're comfortable. If you're not 100% fine, we are recording this. And I think it's also important to note that because we're recording and we do have some sort of interactive pieces later, you'll want to, if you hope to participate in these exercises, remember that we are recording and this could be viewed by people who visit the CBO website. Next slide. So advanced local non-deployment, let's talk about it. Let's get on into it. Non-deployment is basically, for our purposes, the same as digital access and or in the old days of last year, we called it digital equity. So non-deployment strategic priorities are things like digital literacy training, teaching computer classes, maybe supporting digital navigation in your organization, thinking about distributing devices. Maybe it's like figuring out a way to make internet service more affordable for people or offering it in a public place. It could be workforce development training that includes digital skills. So we are open to all kinds of projects. This is sort of, I don't know, I had a supervisor who said broadband is good, but if you build it, they won't come kind of thing. right? Like there has to be a way to get people to want to participate digitally and to give them the resources they need to participate digitally. And so this goes hand in hand with the Broadband School of connecting people to broadband. And we're super excited that this opportunity exists. Next slide. These are the minimum requirements, and I want to make sure you see them because they are necessary in order to have your application approved. You need to demonstrate need. You need to be an eligible applicant. These funds are for capital one-time costs only. They're not for ongoing expenses. You'll need to create and submit a project plan and a timeline, as well as matching funds. Now, matching funds are 15%, but it is also okay to do in-kind matching funds. So staff time, things like that. And we need a complete application. And I will say that if you find the portal a little wonky, or if you are looking at the guidance and you're like, okay, I've got to match this to that, please take the time to do it. This is our first go with this opportunity, and we want to make sure that you're able to give us feedback on that for sure. But please do go through the guidance carefully on the website, and please go through the portal guidance carefully on the website to make sure you don't miss any of these pieces. All right, next one, please. These are the award criteria, and this is a little bit of our own. So I work with someone named Katie Fox, who's also joining this team in a couple of weeks. We wanted you to think about outcomes. This is going to be what we're driving home throughout this webinar today. Outcomes are really important, not outputs, and sometimes not even the projects you're creating, but like, what will they do? How will they change the lives of the people who are impacted by the outcomes? So there are 100 points available, and the statement of need is 30 of those, project proposal is 30, project impact is 30, and what audience or community you're serving is 10. Those are all accurate, but what we added in here is the word outcome to some of these things so that you can start to think about how your outcome might present itself as you're writing your application. So there's a link to the non-deployment addendum there. That is on the website with all the other tier 2 advanced local opportunities. So next slide, please. What is digital access? Here we go. This is great. Next slide. All right, so Katie and I have worked with stakeholders over the past 6 months or so to think about how we all get on the same page about digital access and how it's impacting Coloradans. So why we care is that when Coloradans have the internet access, devices, skills, opportunity, and desire to participate digitally in ways that are meaningful to them, there are certain opportunities that become possible for them. And the opportunities that we think are most sort of rising to the top are that Coloradans have the education, training, skills, and tools to participate in the labor force. If you want to take a college course to get a different job, and you want to participate virtually, you have to have a full screen device, and you have to know how to use it, and you have to have a really good internet connection, right? So that's one. Another is that Coloradans can address their needs, including healthcare, food, safety, education, and community. All of these are social determinants of health. But in recent literature, it has been determined that because digital access touches on each of these things, digital access is actually a super social determinant of health. It is bigger than any one of these on their own. And finally, Coloradans who have digital access can build and maintain connections with their families, communities, and it can be across distances. If all of these things happen, ideally, Coloradans are happy, healthy, and prosperous. So that's what we're shooting for. No big deal. Next slide. And there are lots of elements to digital access. It doesn't just start with like you give someone a computer and suddenly they're magically like filling out forms and getting jobs and and all of that. We have identified people in Colorado who are at these various stages in acquiring digital access. So we always start with a desire to engage. Maybe people like my grandpa, he's passed away now, but when he was in his early 90s, he relied on me to bring my cell phone to his house when he wanted to find something out, but he did not want to do it himself. I mean, I taught digital skills classes at a public library. I could have very easily hooked him up, got him set up, taught him how to do it on his own. He had no desire. So that's where we start. And maybe you know these people like my grandpa. Also, people need meaningful opportunities. They're not going to just hop online for the sake of hopping online. And so, what we mean by this is like, say someone goes into their doctor's office, and at the end of the appointment, someone says to them, oh, make sure you log into your health portal and I'll put a list of your current prescriptions in there. And they have no idea how to do that. That becomes a meaningful opportunity for them to engage. They also need access. I worked in multiple public computer labs, and those are great for a lot of things. People can come in and have support there, and they can fill out job applications and housing forms and apply for benefits and email their friends. It's great. And then there are things like banking and health that might be great in a private space. So thinking about internet access doesn't just mean like, do people have internet connectivity at home, but is it affordable? Is it something they can access when they need it? Is it reliable? And do they need it at home, or are you possibly able to provide that access in a location that they can get to? Devices. I mean, we're talking about smartphones, but smartphones can't do a lot of things. Like, you can't work from home on a smartphone. I have two monitors here. I have two separate computers. I have two phones, right? Like, devices, again, think about how devices fit the need. And then skills and knowledge means, what do people need to do the things that are meaningful to them? So going back to meaningful opportunities. And we believe that AI goes in the skills and knowledge space. Katie and I were both librarians. Talking about information literacy, that's something that librarians have talked about since the 70s. And what that means is, are people able to look at something and determine why it was created, whether or not it's accurate, whether it is something they need? Is it real? Is it true? Is it for fun? And that is AI in a nutshell, from our perspective. Next slide, please. So this is like in Mario Brothers leveling up, right? You're like, burr, burr, burr. You go really fast. Digital access is great. It's fun. Everybody needs it. And then there's this like next level, which is resilience. If you work on a computer in any way, you know that websites, portals, everything changes all the time. And if you teach someone the skill of like going into Google, knowing how to write an email, showing them where the compose button is, and then tomorrow they log in and they can't do any of that because everything's in a different place, that is not resiliency. And we need people to have that. The other reason why this is important is because, especially now that we have AI and we have, children growing up with smartphones and smartwatches and Chromebooks and laptops, people need to understand enough what it is that they're doing online and why, and who's creating the information that they're consuming, so that they can make intentional decisions about how they engage. Do they want their 12-year-old nephew on Instagram or no? Do they need to I don't know. There's lots of examples of this. I don't participate in social media anymore. And that's a choice I make because I have the resiliency to understand why I may or may not want to. So that's what we're getting at there, just to have that in the back of your mind. Next slide. All right, we want people who apply to focus on the impacts of their programs. All right, so here we go. We're getting into it. Next slide. What we usually do, and being in public libraries and working with lots of nonprofits, and I am not trying to criticize anybody. I know everybody has the hugest hearts who are in the digital equity, digital inclusion space. But what we usually do is like, I have this idea for a project. Let's do it. And then after we think about how the project will go, what it is, who's going to participate in it, then we might think about like, oh yeah, I bet this will impact this group of people or that group of library patrons, for example. And then after, it's like as an afterthought, like, oh yeah, we need to measure that. Like, are we going to count people? What are we going to do? Right. So that's usually, or not usually maybe, but often the process that people do. So next slide. There are a few reasons why this doesn't always work. So metrics need to be designed before the activities, because if you can't get the metrics, then you really can't measure outcomes or impact. So if you create a statement of impact first, then you know what your proposal is going to accomplish. And then you can work your program around that to make sure that you achieve what you've set out to achieve. This will help you stay focused. It will know when you're succeeding, and you'll be able to adapt. We already talked about change and how change gets all of us. If any of you have ever done a project or submitted a proposal and done it exactly the way you said you would, I mean, congratulations, but that has never happened to me. So this is why we want you to be resilient in designing your proposal. And this means that you're defining success right from the beginning. It's not going to be an add-on. You're always going to have that North Star of like, this is what we're setting out to do. All right, next slide. So what we want you to do instead is think about this in reverse. This little diagram here is from Backwards Design. It's adapted from a book called Understanding by Design. So how we'd love for you to start thinking about this is, what impact do you want to have? Maybe you work with people who don't speak English as a first language, and you've been trying to figure out how to help them with emails. And so your impact is like, gosh, I would really love to make sure that these folks that are coming into my space know how to send emails to their friends and family, right? So that's the impact. And how you would measure it is going to be the XYZ of it. Those are your metrics, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then think about the activities. Is it going to be a class? Do people often come in at the same time? Is it going to be individual instruction? Is it going to be remote instruction? You know, there are lots of considerations to make. But first, if you can, think about the impact you want to have. Next slide. So we're going to do some work on writing outcomes and what that looks like. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So we're all on the same page. An outcome is a specific, succinct way of defining what success will look like. So if we're successful, what does that look like? That's the long and short of it. Next slide. So I'm going to give you a real example of a digital access outcome. This is something that Katie and I have been working with CSU Extension and with Office of eHealth Innovation. We have now brand new coalition, Digital Access Coalition in Northeast Colorado. So as a result of this coalition, local participants from diverse sectors in the region will understand the digital access landscape of their region more holistically, build relationships with each other, and identify shared priorities. So the questions we're trying to answer with an outcome are, what are you going to do? Who is it for? And what is going to change for them? And you'll know if you've created a strong outcome because it will be saying what the community needs or wants. And I want you to think about it. It doesn't have to be in your outcome, but how do you know that? Did you ask people? Did you hear it from someone? Do you have data to support that? Don't invent projects that you don't know if your community wants or needs. Also think about whether your organization is good at whatever you're proposing, and think about what skills the staff has. Utilize those. It will help with capacity. What does your organization have time to take on? You probably aren't going to be able to hire new staff for this, right? If it's just a one-time cost. So what do you think people will be good at and willing to do? And then, is this unique for your community, or is it meeting a demand that isn't met? So often, for example, there might be digital skills classes in a small community, but maybe it's too far away for some of the people in the community to get to, or maybe the bus doesn't stop there. And so people may need another set of those same classes in a different location. So those are the types of things we want you to think about. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. And so same visual again, right? We want you to think about how your outcome might relate to one of these. Where does your program fit in? Is it a skills and knowledge situation? Do people need devices? Just, to kind of tie it into what we've already been thinking about in our strategies. All right, next slide. And same with us. Is it digital access, or is this more in the resiliency, adaptability part of the process? Next slide. All right, so I'm going to give you 2 more examples, and then I want you to practice writing some of these on your own. This will be interactive on a tool called Padlet. It is anonymous. We don't want you to use like actual things that you want us to comment on, because we cannot do that with an open application. But what we want you to do is practice writing outcomes. So maybe it is for this project, but don't say who you are, or, or expect us to tell you yes or no on anything. We're all going to look at these together. They're going to go on like a digital board. And then we'll comment and think about how to write things better, maybe. So we'll see how this goes. But here's one example, just to give you another example that isn't the Northeast Coalition. As a result of technology classes, people in Denver with limited computer skills will learn how to manage their passwords, how to protect their privacy online, and how to add attachments to emails. Right? So who's it for? It's for people in Denver. What's it going to do? It's going to show them how to protect their privacy, add attachments, manage passwords. And what's the project? Technology classes. Hopefully that's helpful. Same thing, as a result of device distribution, people in Mesa County without any large screen device and children under the age of 18 at home can get a laptop. This one's more specific. The audience is the people in Mesa County who don't have a large screen device and who also have children under the age of 18 at home. The outcome is they get a laptop, and the program or activity is device distribution. So hopefully those are helpful. All right, so to do this, we are going to, you know what, I closed my Padlet. So what you can do is you can either scan the QR code with a phone if you want to do it that way. Thank you. If you scan the QR code with your phone, it will take you to the board. I'm going to do that right now. And there's one example note there already. And you can either use the green post button in the bottom right corner of your screen or the green plus sign on your phone. Go ahead and click that once. The template is already in those notes. So if you click a post, it will say, as a result of activity, audience, and impact. So your template's already there. Go ahead and give it a try. Write 1 or 2 outcomes. And I will give you maybe just a couple of minutes. We'll see how this goes.
Melanie, do you want me to switch to the other screen?
Yeah, I think that might be helpful so people can see what's showing up on the Padlet.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's see. Maybe make that bigger.
Perfect. Yeah, love it. Yeah, this is great. Thank you. Amazing, y'all. So I see the little dots at the top moving, which means people are still typing. So let's give it, I know this is a lot to think about in just a couple of minutes. Um, but I'll give it, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds or so. And if you need more time, feel free to maybe raise your hand, your digital hand or something. But it looks like there may be another one or two coming in. Yep, I knew it. Okay. We can, if you're still typing, go for it. Feel free to keep at it. But let's look at a few of these. How are we feeling? And feel free to, you can just either unmute or comment in the chat. For example, as a result of AI awareness training, seniors in Colorado will be savvy to AI fraud. How does this feel? I see the activity, the audience, and the impact. Yeah. As a result of technology classes, older adults in Arapahoe County will learn how to protect their privacy online, communicate with loved ones, and navigate health portals. How's that feel? Anybody have any feedback on that one? I'm seeing all three elements in that too. Then we have a few lifeline ones. As a result of street outreach by Lifeline agents, eligible individuals will learn about free phone and internet benefits, complete the enrollment process, and gain reliable access to communication for work, healthcare, school, and emergency services. Yeah, so as you can see, some of these are very short, but they're still great outcomes. And some of these are longer and they provide a little more detail. Both are fine. And really, I want to bring this back to like, this is your proposal. And so it's up to you what you want to include in these outcomes, but they should be your North Star. And so I hope that everyone on this call will think about their outcomes in this way, using this template before they decide to really jump into their proposals. Because I think it does provide that sight line to your end game.
I have a
Any,
question. Can you
yeah,
provide
go ahead.
more than one of these? So like I wrote the one about Lifeline, but we're the organization that hands out the those devices and the street level and at human services to people who are on food stamps or Medicaid. So that's one aspect of it, but also we are interested in engaging in digital literacy and providing devices at like the Denver Library. I don't know if you guys just saw on the news how the Denver library just lost access to its devices and being able to borrow out laptops and hotspots. So we want to include that as well. So can it be multifaceted when we do it?
That's a good question.
Or does it need to have like one central theme? Like, could I create two of these, right? And like one is this. So it's like one thing we meet people with devices in the street, but since we also have access to the devices, we can work with the public libraries and we can have digital advocates at those libraries who can pass out devices, sign them out, or participate in that program as well. So I guess my question is, can it be a multifaceted version of this, or does it need to have like one streamlined focus, or do we write that into one goal? How would you suggest that?
I
Yeah,
can
Megan,
jump
you see.
in, Melanie.
Yeah,
So I
please.
think as a general rule, your proposal can be multifaceted. Since we're in the open application window, we can't really answer the super specific questions about your example. But you can definitely have a multifaceted approach, as long as you outline um, um, what's the how it meets all the minimum requirements and award criteria as you're writing your application.
Okay.
So I think, the exercise here is really to make sure you're thinking of that outcome so that when you do work on your application, that comes through clearly as we go to review it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you for helping with that, Megan.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think it's okay for us to go back to our slides, and thank you for participating in that little exercise. All right. Next slide is, this is just something I want to reiterate. Think about if it's a strong outcome, and you'll know if you can answer these questions. So if you review this webinar, and I believe, the slides will be available on the website too. You'll be able to come back to this and kind of ask yourself these questions. All right, next slide, please. We did the discussion already, so go ahead. This is the same slide I showed earlier, but with the word outcome highlighted, right? Because if you write a good outcome, it will help you write your statement of need. Some of the questions that we asked in the previous purple slide earlier, does the target audience want or need this? How do you know? These are some of the things you could include in your application. Project proposal, right? How does your outcome connect to that state vision for digital access? If you want to tell us where it lies in that framework of, we notice people aren't engaging, so this is how we're hoping to get them to engage. Your activities and services will be in your proposal, and they'll be related to both your metrics and your outcome. And your project outcome is going to be the impact, basically. So all of these things are tied together, and we just want to make that really explicit so that you know why we even offered this webinar in the first place.
Melanie, can I chime in there real quick?
Of course.
On the award criteria, I just wanted to circle back to it real quick because you have minimum requirements and award criteria. So the way the portal is situated, it's just one box to put all those answers and questions in. So you really want to make sure it's clear what answer is answering what question. So, I just wanted you to be careful about that. The same with the minimum requirements. Make sure you're actually providing an answer to those bullet points that you saw in those questions and stuff, so that when the application is getting reviewed, I know what goes with what, or whoever's reviewing knows what answers for what question. So just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Yeah, Steve and
Absolutely.
I were talking about this the other day. So do make sure you answer all of the minimum requirements and all of the award criteria, even if it's all in one box. It will
Just
help
because
the reviewers.
it's so competitive, you probably have a lot of requests with so few dollars. So the competitiveness is going to be, you want to make sure your application is the best that it can be. So
yeah, thank you. I don't know, Kirby. That's a great question. Is there a character limit?
There are character limits, but I think we've provided. I've seen some long narratives in in our other tiers, so I think you'll be able to get it all in there. But if you're going past 15,000 characters, um, you know, you might want to think about maybe streamlining it a little bit more or something, or tweaking it a little bit. But I think you should have more than enough text space to include your answers in. So if you do run into a problem, please let us know. If it's just not enough, just reach out to us and we'll see what we can do. But no guarantees there. But there is a character limitation.
Okay, thank you. We have another question too. Is the number of people impacted by the project a consideration for awarding the grant? For example, we can focus on underserved populations, but some of those underserved groups also represent a very small number of the population. And I would say the way that you tell us why you want to ask for funding for a certain population, big or small, will be the ticket to like answering that question. Does that sound fair, Megan and Stephen? Like if it's a small number of people, tell us why it matters. And again, go back to those. Is it meeting a unique need? Is it meeting demand that isn't being met? Right. Go ahead, Megan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and maybe, oh, we don't have the minimum requirements slide right before this, but yeah, it's not specifically called out in the minimum requirements or the award criteria, like the, more population is better or worse. So, so yeah, it's really about, you know, focusing on these award criteria and like how you define your statement of need will really be the ticket there. Like the target audience could be small, it could be large, but the size of that audience is not a direct award criteria.
Yeah, thank you. And we also have a question about the total amount of funding available and if there's a maximum amount to be requested, given the 15% match.
There's no maximum request amount. We ask that you consider the total funding available, which hopefully Brian or Stephen can jump in and have that number. I think it's 13 or 14 million across all non-deployment, last mile, and short-term construction projects. So we have one big bucket of funding for these three project types. So, don't ask for 15 million because we don't have that much money. But other than that, there's no single project limit.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly, Megan. That's absolutely right in terms of it's about 14 million across all those what, three tiers? Yeah. Or categories, should I say. I'm sorry. But that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then finally, and I think I know the answer to this question, will it be this year only? No, I believe there will be new rounds of funding every year. Megan is nodding, and you can apply every year, but just remember that these are one-time costs, and so you can't apply to like keep someone you hired on for the same project. Am I saying that well? Stephen or Megan, you can jump in.
Yeah, no, you got you got it. Yeah, no, it's you nailed it. So you're rocking it.
Great. Okay. And
I
can costs go to hiring a digital navigator for the year?
think there's another question there. Oh, did you just read
Capital
it?
projects are eligible requests for this program as long as they fit the minimum requirements.
I believe so. Yeah, I think we might want to take these last two questions back and make sure we have accurate answers for those. So the capital projects, um, capital projects are eligible requests, and the can one-time costs go towards hiring a digital navigator for the year. I think we'll want to take those two back to make sure we have accurate answers for those.
Okay.
I just want to be clear that I'm not sure what do we mean when we say digital navigator, Melanie? Is that something that you've
Yeah,
heard? I'm not sure.
it's a specific, and Joshua, feel free to correct me if I don't represent your question correctly, but digital navigators in this space are individuals who sit one-on-one with people to help them with whatever kind of skills
Okay.
acquisition they need. So libraries are like places where there are lots of navigators.
Yep, I didn't want to speculate what I
Yep.
thought it meant, but thanks for the
Yep.
clarity.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. I thought so, but I wanted to make sure we were on the same page. Cool. All right. Before we close this out, and we can come back to questions, I do want to talk a little bit about the metrics piece of this too, because this is going to be important. So let's go to our next slide. And thank you for the great questions. This is good. All right. Next one. Another sort of not official definition, but so we agree. Metrics are the concrete ways that we define, track, and measure what success looks like. And remember, success is our North Star, it's our impact, it's our outcome. All right, next slide. So to make meaningful metrics, you want to align the metrics to your outcome. And I would also encourage you not to just think about metrics as, well, we're done, this is what happened, but also to think about what you can track that will help you learn along the way. So if you need to pivot or you're not getting the results that you expected, you might want to make adjustments based on those metrics. And like, I've been excited to see data aligned to my work. For example, I worked at a children's reference desk for a while, and we had this tool called Stories of Impact where you could submit interactions that went well or that demonstrated that people were enjoying the library. And so talking to a little 6-year-old kid about horror books with his dad and showing him how to use the nonfiction section so he could find more spooky stories, for kids. That was a great interaction, and it was great for the dad, it was great for me, and it was great for the kid. And so being able to collect that sort of data made me feel good. I was excited to be like, yes, my job is meaningful and this is fun. Collecting consistent and clean data is difficult, right? Like, Katie gave me an example because she used to do data work in libraries, and some of the librarians were like, well, maybe we just collect a survey from parents after story time. I don't know if you've all been to story time, but often it's toddlers, babies, diapers, screaming, dancing, Cheerios. I mean, it's wild. It is wild. And so the thought of like wrangling down a parent or caregiver with a 2-year-old and a bucket of Cheerios to fill out a survey seems like maybe not really like a thing that's going to work. So think about this as you are wondering how you're going to measure for your program. Do you have time to develop the tool? Do you know how to develop a tool? It's not really easy to create surveys. And if you do like a pre and post survey, we ran into this accidentally because we had 2 different people working at different times on a project. The pre-survey wasn't the same questions as a post-survey. And so the data wasn't really useful, right? So we also want to make sure that your data is private, especially people's personally identifiable information. You don't want like a spreadsheet that everybody on the staff can get into if it contains people's names or other personal information. So when you're writing your proposal, think about how you're going to describe your plan to keep people's privacy intact. I think that's all I want to say about this. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. All right, so, and I'm not going to go through these in super detail, but I want you to know that they will be available after this webinar. These are some examples of metrics. So again, going back to that coalition that we're working on right now, some of the ways we know whether our coalition is working, right? I again want to go back to the impact. The impact is that local participants from diverse sectors in the region will understand the landscape, they'll understand the region more holistically, and they'll build relationships with each other and identify shared priorities. So you'll notice those metrics match that. What percent of the participants in the coalition say they have a new relationship? What percent of the participants agree that their shared priorities are reflecting their perspective? And what percent of participants report their understanding of the digital landscape in their region changed? The data collection tool we've been using is surveys, but let me tell you, it is not easy to get people to fill out surveys. People are tired of surveys. I delete the surveys I get. Did you enjoy your new pair of running shoes? I don't care, right? So this tool is the tool we have, but what we're doing now is asking people to fill out the surveys as part of the time they're committing to their meeting. So in the meeting, we say, here's 10 minutes, please fill out the survey. So these are things you need to think about and adjust. The other two, I will let you take a look at them on your own, but I will note in the data collection column, we have different types, like surveys are common, they have pros and cons. Task or a work product is also common, pros and cons. And you'll notice in the last row, we're talking about that device distribution example, people getting a large screen device. We can measure how many devices go out, but that's an output. It's not really telling us whether there's an impact. Like, we don't know if the people are using the device or how they are, if they are, right? So this metric isn't really getting at any kind of output. And in fact, our example of the outcome in impact isn't really a great example for impact. All right. Hopefully that makes some kind of sense. All right, next slide. Remember this, not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. And that's just a fact of it. And it's disappointing. It would be great if everyone shared the same values and everyone was like, this matters. But that's not the case. And you can't, just because you can count something doesn't mean you should. Okay. Next slide. All right, so these are some of those pros and cons. This slide, frequently used metrics 1, is focusing on people's experiences, feelings, preferences, and perspectives. So you'll see there are pros and cons to surveys, interviews, and focus groups. Those are the primary types of gathering data for people's experiences. You'll see some advantages and challenges on the right. And again, I think I'll let you look at this mostly on your own. I would like to call out that designing questions can be hard. They need to be consistent across everybody you ask, whether it's in surveys, interviews, or focus groups. And when you have something that isn't a survey, like an interview or a focus group, you're going to get paragraphs of data back. We did this when we were writing our digital access plan. And you have to kind of interpret, like, it's not going to be these straightforward like numbers and things. It'll be like, oh, I don't go online, I'm going to get hacked, and that's scary to me. So think about, if you're asking those types of questions, how are you going to determine how the replies either inform or don't inform your outcomes and your impacts? It's hard. It's hard. And I just want that on your radar more than anything. Not to scare you, but getting data is hard because humans are hard. Next slide. So this one is frequently used metrics 2. And this is people's behaviors using observation instead. And an example of this is some of our data team at the library would sometimes go to branches, and instead of bothering people with like asking them questions, they would just watch. For example, sometimes someone would come in, go to the circulation desk, ask about, what holds they might have to pick up. And then they might go to the catalog computer and then they might browse, or they might come in and use the computer and leave. Right. So that's information. And that's a cool way to gather it, because you're not asking people for input, you're sort of collecting it. But then you need to think about being consistent across locations, or are all the locations the same, or is there difference? Kind of changing the way you interpret the data. And then there's also skills and learning. So say you teach a class and you say, okay, great. Now I want everybody to print out this picture that you attach to your email or something. I don't know. That might be a way to measure whether people's learned in a classroom or in an individual instruction setting. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, just 9 minutes to go. So next slide. So I would love for anybody to take a stab at this, right? You have 3 options, and I want you to tell me whether 1, 2, or 3 is the metric that aligns with this outcome. As a result of technology classes, people in Denver with limited computer skills will learn how to manage their passwords, how to protect their privacy online, and how to add attachments to emails. We've seen this one before. Anyone think that it is number 1, percentage of people who start the class and then complete it? Does that align? Number 2, percentage of people who would recommend this class to a friend or neighbor. Think about whether that aligns. Remember, the outcome is people are learning how to manage passwords, protect their privacy, and add attachments. Number 3, percentage of participants who report they are more confident at the end of the class. Any of those work for anybody? I see a thumbs up. Feel like, yeah, 3. People are going with 3. Okay. I also went with 3. And Katie was like, trick question, because really none of these are measuring whether or not people know how to manage their passwords, protect their privacy, or add attachments to emails. Anybody have any ideas for what would measure that? Thinking about the last slides and different ways of measurement. Because I'm feeling, if nobody's putting anything in the chat, I'm just going to say it. I'm feeling like the task-based way of measuring might work, right? Like after each of these exercises in the class, you might say, yeah, it's the closest. I agree, Elena. Yeah, people can demonstrate the skill. So you might say like, hey, everybody, we're going to go around the room. You tell us your tool that you learned that you're going to use to manage your passwords. Then you know that they were listening, they have a plan, and they actually learned it. Okay, so don't get tricked by these. I did. But we can do it. It's work in progress. All right, next slide. I'm not going to do this because we're short on time, but I think, go back to the slides when they are on the website and think about how you write a metric for your own outcome. Examples would be participants that report developing a new relationship, like we talked about in the coalition, or the number of devices that were distributed to homes. And remember to align the metrics to the outcome. Remember that you have to be able to get this data consistently, and it has to be clean, and you have to honor people's privacy and the choice to participate or not participate. So in that classroom example, if 9 people say, yeah, I'm going to share with you, and 1 person doesn't, we don't want you to be like, you have to tell us how you're going to manage your passwords, right? That's not the vibe we're going for. All right, next slide. We're not discussing because we didn't do Padlet. So aligning outcomes and metrics and activities. Let's go to the next slide. We're going back to the same exact diagram. Remember, start with your impact, your outcome. What are you trying to do? Who are you trying to have an effect on? What metrics are you going to use to know whether or not that happened? And then think about the activities that will lead to that impact or outcome. Next slide. These are some great examples that you will maybe want to review. I am not going to go into these. Let's go to the next slide because I think that hits at what we're getting at better. Yeah, there we go. So what you see here is the 3 bullet points in the outcome column. These are the things we want to happen. These are our outcomes. The metrics that we've designed match 1-to-1 with these 3 bullet points. There are 3 metrics that hit on each of these 3 outcomes. And then there are some activities that will get us to the metrics that get us to the outcomes that we want. So you can look at this either from outcomes to activities or backwards, but they should go back and forth if you need them to. Okay. Next slide, please. Yeah, these are just recaps. We are reiterating this over and over and over again. Like, again, think about what's it going to take to get to this metric. You can use it as a hypothesis. If we do get X activity, then will Y metric happen? Is it likely, or is this just sort of a throwing spaghetti at the wall? And then finally, do you have the capacity to do the activities? Next slide. All right, wrap up. Next slide. Same slide again, same slide again. This can also be called designing for impact. Keep it in your mind. Hopefully this sinks in. I don't know. Next slide. Here's your award criteria again. And I think, honestly, we have some other slides that we'll post, and it's just kind of revisiting these same, like thinking about it in a different way as we add on these different pieces. So I'm gonna end with this so that we do have like 2 minutes. If you have any questions specifically about this presentation, or you want to add a question to the chat for us to get to later, please do that. I don't want to short people time if they have some brief questions. Yeah, thank you. The application is open now, Joshua, and it closes on, oh gosh, now I forgot the date, August 23rd.
I think it's the 28th. I'll double check that.
Okay.
Because we made a few changes in the portal after it opened, we're extending that deadline. So those updates will also be on the website hopefully this afternoon or tomorrow morning, along with these slides and recording.
Thank you. And then also, when will awards be announced and funds distributed?
That's going to hit. God, I wish I would have had the timeline in front of me. I can't recall it right off the top of my head, but I think that hits around October, somewhere in October, I believe. But it's also on the web. It's also on the website as well. All that information is
Brian
there.
Martin. Yeah,
hey,
I can confirm that for you all. That's October. Middle October is when we'll announce provisional awards. So.
Thank you, Brian.
So we are at time, and I will just close it out real quick here. And Melanie, that was a fire presentation. Thank you so much. It was so much information. I expect around non-deployment, perfect applications will come in. It's going to be so hard to decide because they will all be perfect, and that's what we want. So I just want to thank everybody for attending, and thank you for your time, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody.